Ralph is a senior politician, a senior statesman in the Caribbean. Ralph has good language skills. And I thought that Ralph was absolutely ridiculous with the level of condemnation and the contempt with which he has held his colleagues and, his fellow OECS countrymen and countrywomen.
I'm opposed to selling the passports and the citizenship in principle. I'm opposed on the grounds of practicality. I'm opposed on the grounds that it is not sustainable and that it is reckless to run your country's finances on selling passport and citizenship.
Ralph, you are speculating that there may be corruption in other programs. I do not appreciate your literally treating us with a broad brush and to implicate one of the best run investment immigration programs in the world, the Antigua and Barbuda program, with the type of adjectives and mismanagement and corruption that you're talking about. And I would say to here, Ralph, I am aware that within St. Vincent and Grenadines, from time to time, you give people who make economic contributions, and I'm talking about foreigners who make significant economic contributions, you give them citizenship. First of all, I felt that Ralph's statement was unfortunate, and for somebody who I admire, especially his language skills, when it comes to good language, Ralph is not short of good language. And I think this was a deliberate and provocative attack on, member states within the OECS, his colleagues, and, as small, vulnerable countries, we always encourage leaders to stand in solidarity with each other, recognizing that, the same stick that beats the wild goat is the same one that will beat the tame. And I was a little shocked that Ralph could be so reckless with his language to treat of all of us with the same broad brush. And whereas I am not in a position to admit, or for that matter, deny any corruption in any other program, I can certainly speak to our program. And I want to say to Ralph definitively that the accusations that he made of corruption in these programs, which would have included Antigua and Barbuda, they certainly don't apply to our country. And I also want to say to Ralph that Antigua and Barbuda runs a legitimate investment immigration program that is no different than the EB5. It's no different than the one in Canada. It's no different than those in the European Union. I also want to say to Ralph that we have not published a single application without appropriate due diligence, which includes international due diligence agencies and regional institutions, global institutions, including Interpol and impacts here within the Caribbean region, or JRCC for that matter. So this notion that there's a lot of corruption and we are processing applications without due diligence and so on, I want to say certainly in the case of Antigua and Barbuda, your information is flawed. And even if, Ralph, you are speculating that there may be corruption in other programs, I do not appreciate your literally treating us with a broad brush and to implicate one of the best run investment immigration programs in the world, the Antigua and Barbuda program, with the type of adjectives and mismanagement and corruption that you're talking about. And I would say to here, Ralph, I am aware that within St. Vincent and Grenadines, from time to time, you give people who make economic contributions, and we're talking about foreigners who make significant economic contributions, you give them citizenship. So whereas in Antigua and Barbuda, we don't have that type of leverage within our constitution to make those people citizens. The CIP, on the other hand, gives us the opportunity to give people who make significant economic contributions via our CIP program citizenship. So it's no different from what you're doing. And I will never pass my place to go and accuse you of corruptly giving passports to the people who you have given passports to. It will be out of order, and it certainly would not be supporting camaraderie and comity among, two prime ministers within the region. So I don't know what issue or issues Ralph may have within St. Vincent and the Grenadines. I don't know if it's an issue in which, political parties in St. Vincent and the Grenadines are fighting on the issue of CIP. And I have a policy, I don't get involved in people's domestic politics. But if that is the case, well, keep that within St. Vincent and Grenadines. Don't implicate other countries within the region. I think you have gone too far, and you may want to reconsider whether or not you should not be a little more circumspect in your discussions and in your articulations in the future. And what is very unfortunate about this, we are trying to carve out a good living standard for the people of the region. Many of our countries have transitioned into immigration investment programs to raise additional revenues to take care of the obligations of our governments and to uplift our people. And these programs have made significant contributions to our development. I recall, for example, when we got in June of 2014, our country was literally on the precipice of bankruptcy. And it is the CIP revenues that rescued us, because at that time, 2 items of expenditure, namely salaries and wages and debt repayment, exhausted all of our revenues. And if it was not for the CIP program, that would have brought in just over 100 million EC dollars a year on average, or maybe an average of 100 million a year. So we would have collected about $1 billion, maybe 1.1 billion, because I think the first year we raised as much as $200 million in a given year. If it wasn't for that, the fortunes of Antigua and Barbuda would have been significantly different. Now, this idea about visa-free access, I don't know why Ralph believes that, the CIP countries will use visa-free access, and that St. Vincent and Grenadines will be able to retain visa-free access. At the end of the day, we're operating within the same space. Mm-hmm. And as I said before, the same stick that beats the wild goat is the same one that can beat the tame. Mm-hmm. To the best of my knowledge, St. Vincent and Grenadines has no visa-free access into Canada, but you have the CIP program. And why do you think that if the European Union were to revoke the visa-free access of the CIP OECS countries, why do you think that in St. Vincent and the Grenadines will continue into perpetuity? So what should be happening here together is that we should be supporting each other, because they may use CIP to stop our visa-free access, but they'll use some other reason to stop visa-free access into St. Vincent and the Grenadines. So it is not appropriate for Ralph to be trashing us with the hope that we lose our visa-free access. And by the way, no decision has been taken up to this point by the European Union, and even information too that somebody circulated about the US saying that they may not allow OECS Caribbean countries that have CIPs access into the United States. No such decision has been taken. So that's not even reliable information that Ralph is peddling. And even if that was the case, we would expect some level of empathy, not ridicule coming from, a colleague prime minister, senior prime minister who we all love and respect. And if it is that it is to satisfy your domestic base, it has gone beyond your base, it has reached our shores, and you are literally undermining the integrity of leaders, within the other countries, and you are undermining our states. In fact, what you're doing, Ralph, you're giving fodder to people external of the region to take punitive action against us. And in many instances, the information that I have is flawed because, we operate within a very hostile political space. And opposition parties, unfortunately, have made our CIP programs the subject of battleground politics, and they make up all kind of stories. Every now and then, every immigration investment program in the world would have some kind of crook involved in some kind of nefarious financial activity that would slip through the program. And what do you call this? You call this residual risk. No program is perfect. You think that the EB-5 have not attracted a few people who would have slipped through the cracks, maybe been involved in financial impropriety. That has happened in the case of Antigua and Barbuda. And for the 12 years that we've been operating, we have had about 3 such individuals who have slipped through the program, including Choksi. Choksi, for example, he was able to get our citizenship because at the time when they did the due diligence, the information on his alleged plunder of the bank in India was not public. So he got a clean due diligence report. Mm-hmm. But subsequently, when the information broke, steps were taken to revoke his citizenship. And as you know, he's somewhere now in Belgium, and they're looking now to repatriate him to India. Mm-hmm. So, I felt that was an extremely unfortunate and irresponsible statement coming from Ralph. And you must respect the sovereign decision of these 4 countries. If you choose to have our CIP program, that has nothing to do with you. You choose not to have one, we respect your decision.
Trump has one.
And look at the situation there, for example, with Trump. So why you don't say that the $5 million CIP program that Trump is introducing is corrupt? How come intrinsically you're going to now point to your colleague programs and say they're corrupt? And look, even if there are abuses in these programs in the past, the reality is all of us have now come together. We are forming this regional regulatory body to regulate our programs. These programs have matured. And I will even accept that perhaps in some of the programs they may not have been as vigilant as they ought to. And maybe certain unfortunate things may have happened. But it's not that leaders in this region are intrinsically involved in any corruption and trying to facilitate corrupt players. And that's the implication of what Ralph would have said. Now, the fact that we've come together now and that we're harmonizing our programs and we're making sure that there's better cooperation and collaboration. The United States, for example, gave us 6 points that we introduced in our program to our respective programs in order to strengthen our programs. We're working with the European Union and the Brits. And having been involved in this level of international collaboration and cooperation to strengthen our programs, why would Ralph see it fit to go there and to tear down our programs? It is totally inappropriate. And what I'll say here now, if the people in St. Vincent and Grenadines or the opposition for that matter, they believe that CIP or having an investment immigration program will be a benefit to their country, they have a right so to do as well. You know, for Ralph to go and bully nobody and tell them what to do. But, Ralph, I hope we'll remain friends, because it's not the first time he did it, I remember when I was in opposition, I said something about CIP. I was promoting CIP. And I don't know who called him. Must be Harold Lovelock. And he and Harold used to be good at the time. And the man went and observed and rebutted me, And, I rebutted him. And we remain friends. So I hope now, having rebutted him on what I consider to have been a very irresponsible statement, that Ralph will remain my sustaining friend. I love your comment. Yeah, look, whereas I can vouch for our program, and I can tell you that I've never been involved in any act of unintegrity with any CIP citizen at any point in the history of the Labour Party operating the program. On the other hand, I'm not going to go there and berate other programs that may have had weaknesses, because I understand that, look, at the end of the day, we got to stand in solidarity with each other, that there has to be some comity among leaders within the region. It's not for us to exploit any gaps that we may see. If Ralph Adam probably went on the program and said, you know what, these programs need to be strengthened, and they need to XYZ, I would respect that. But you don't come and trash our program and call us corrupt. I think you pass your place, Ralph. You need to come better than that. Because how would you like, for example, if the 5 of us who have CIP programs came and lash you and say that what you're doing is corrupt? How would you love that? But we're not going to go down that road. And I love you at the end of the day.
I found him to be quite contemptuous. However,
very.
I thought it's the same Ralph I hear crying the other day, that when Trump said that if we continue to entertain the Cuban practitioners here, that we're not going to be able
visas.
Boy, Ralph cried. I know he's your friend.
Him a friend.
Ralph crying, no joke. I mean, so the way he sounded a little xenophobic to y'all. Didn't sound like if St. Vince off. I know you don't want us to criticize him. Off in a world by itself, right? But when you have the CIP people, they add into your population, right? They come, they visit, even though sometimes they don't have to come. So that means when they come, they spend money because they have to find some place to stay. They eventually might buy a home. So that means they're going to hire people to work for them. They're going to pay a POA, or they may rent for a while. So there is benefit other than just them having a passport.
Let me buttress that point. I think it was Deacon Mitchell who at the CS conference here in Antigua, he said that for the 80s, 90s, the last, 30 years or so, they struggled to attract a single hotel investment within Grenada. The CIP program would have since, barring the gentleman there from Egypt who built Silver Sands, would have helped them to get some additional properties. In Grenada, you have this company Range. Well, not Grenada, but let's say Dominica for that matter, in St. Kitts. You have this company Range that has built several hotels. In fact, the St. Kitts hotel project, or product for that matter, more than 50% of the rooms are CIP generated.
Okay.
Absolutely.
That's what I'm
And
talking about.
I'll tell you this much
taxes
too.
are going to result as even more than CIP. Now you have a compounding.
I recall in 1999 when I came into government, the only country in the Caribbean that had a higher debt to GDP than Antigua was St. Kitts. It's about 200%. What do you think they use to pay down the debt? The same CIP. And when you look at infrastructure in St. Kitts today, they have really good roads.
So
CIP, you know. So CIP, and look, Ralph is benefiting from CIP. The people of St. Vincent and Grenadines benefit from CIP. We have 98% backing ratio for our currency. It's a common currency for St. Vincent and Grenadines. So where do you think a lot of that foreign currency come from? The same CIP, which is benefiting the government and people of the St. Vincent and Grenadines. So be careful how you condemn us, because at the end of the day, you know, all of us in this in the same boat, you know, and all of us have our vulnerabilities. And when you look at it in the context, right, that we live in a world that really, you know, these international institutions and these large countries, they really don't care about us, you know. We're on the fringes of global development, yeah? And if we don't try and have a little carve-out somewhere in order to protect the living standards of our people, we're going to see a denigration in the living standards. Now, we have tried a number of things. We have tried gaming. We have tried offshore banking, even when we had bananas and so on. Our development is always harmful to certain people. And in many instances, the information that they're promoting is not even true. When, for example, that they accuse us of having a lot of offshore assets and all sorts of issues about money laundering and so on, you think the money laundering taking place in the OECS Caribbean? When I looked at the amount of assets that we had in our jurisdiction when this issue of de-risking and so on was a major issue, it was 1.5 billion US. And the transactions were extremely limited. And by the way, now that 1.5 billion US was not even banked in our domestic banks, no, banked in banks in the United States primarily. So the assets were not even being employed within our jurisdiction. And when you look at various countries in Europe, as well as North America, various states, they had trillions of dollars of transactions taking place. And here's a situation coming to point a finger at us with minuscule transactions, no evidence of any significant money laundering, maybe barring the situation there with Stanford and Minor Bank. Those are the two that happened in the past. And they have had their share of scandals with all kind of criminal elements. In fact, I read an article some time ago in which someone in the Conservative government had said that the UK was emerging as a proxy for Russian oligarch investments and they're banking their monies there. So I'm just saying this to say that what is happening is that these small countries, you find the powerful always want to make an example of them. And when our own go out there and condemn us, they are literally giving fodder to these people to punish us. And it is inappropriate. And as I said, Ralph is a senior politician, a senior statesman in the Caribbean. Ralph has good language skills. And I thought that Ralph was absolutely ridiculous with the level of condemnation and the contempt with which he has held his colleagues and his fellow OECS countrymen and countrywomen.
Hi everyone. Thanks for checking out the Bub Report's social media pages. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch our weekly live show, follow our Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram pages, and also subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can catch repeat episodes on Wednesdays at 4 and 5 p.m. respectively on CRFM Radio and GBN TV in Grenada. We are also viewed on Sundays at 8 p.m. on WPG 10 throughout the Caribbean. Thanks for watching.